Welcome to section 13.2. In this section, we're really going to figure out how credit card finances are charged. And so we're going to be looking at a lot of credit card situations. And what I've chosen are, I think, four examples that are closely tied to the homework. So this first one that I'm doing really covers questions 1 through 4, or sorry, 1 through 3 when you go through the homework. But it forms the basis of everything that happens. And so they'll get a little bit more involved as we go along, but we'll try to keep the numbers relatively nice. There's some good examples in the book, and I also know that you can get good examples through my math lab as well. And so um, the interest charged is simply going to be the interest rate times the amount. And the amount for a credit card is typically what they call the average daily balance. So sometimes they'll give us that average daily balance, and sometimes we'll have to calculate it. It takes a little bit of time to calculate it, but it's still relatively manageable. So let's take a look at one of the first problems here. Let me move this one out of the way, and we'll go look at this. Find the finance charge on an average daily balance of $259.54 if the monthly interest rate is 1.5%. Assume interest is calculated on the average daily balance of the account. That'll be the case for all of these. They're going to be calculated on the average daily balance. And this is nice. They gave us that average daily balance. And so all we have to do is apply the interest rate for the month to know how much interest is going to accrue during that month. And so the interest that's accrued is simply the interest rate, remembering to change it to be a real number. That's 1.5% written as its decimal equivalent, times the average daily balance. That is how we're going to answer this first, second, and third question. Just a familiarity with the process. So we take 0.015, multiply by 259.54, and we come out with $3 and 89 cents. Sorry for the hesitation there. So I have what I'm seeing on my calculator is 3.8931. They will do regular rounding, so I'm rounding to that position. This number was underneath 5, so we're going to leave it as a 9. So you will be rounding in a lot of these instances, and you know the computer, it wants you to round appropriately. I did have a student one time say 1.5%. I wish I could have a credit card that gives me 1.5%. Remember, this 1.5% that's being advertised here is the monthly rate. And so what the credit card is producing is the annual percentage rate. So if I'm going to see that as an annual percentage rate, I got to take the 1.5 times 12 and realize that this is a credit card that has 18% APR, right? That's split over 12 months at 1.5% for being the monthly rate. So that's the right view of that type of setting. It's not a super low interest rate, it's a relatively normal one because we see credit card rates be in the upper teens to mid 20s and sometimes even into the 30% categories. So let's come in here and look at this next problem. Sorry, try to move these other problems out of the way. Want to have as much set up as possible for you as you came to these videos. This was the next group of problems, and this constituted about 3 more problems, 4, 5, and 6. And so what's going to happen here is they're going to tell you some credit card transactions. Hopefully they'll keep it relatively small so that we don't have a huge amount of work to do. But it's very representative, and you can see how it would be done very easily in a spreadsheet on a computer. So let's take a look at this situation. For the credit card account, assume 1 month between billing dates with the appropriate number of days, an interest of 1.5% per month on the average daily balance. Find the average daily balance, B, the monthly finance charge, and C, the account balance going into the next billing. So what we did in the last problem is we did part B. We found out the monthly finance charge. And we were given the average daily balance. Now we have to find that average daily balance. So let's look at what's happening. So the credit card gets billed on July 7th. So on July 7th, right, on the 7th of July, so I'll do 7/7, what our account balance is $774.50. Then on July 14th, we make a payment. And when we make that payment of $300, our balance drops to $474.50. Then on the 29th, we make a charge. We go out to lunch and it costs us $34.41. So I need to add that to the 474.50 to come up with 508.91. And then on August 2nd, which is still in the billing cycle, right? Because the billing cycle goes up until August 7th. So on August 2nd, though, we have another charge that makes the cutoff, and that is for $69.72 as we bought some concert tickets, and it goes up to 578.63. Right? And so that's where we're at on August 2nd. That balance, then there's no other charges, so on August 4th, that's where we come up with the balance for the next cycle, which is 578.63. So that's our balance going into the month. So what we need to do is figure out our average daily balance. So the billing cycle starts on the 7th, and on the 7th I have $774.50. That's the amount on the card right now, and it stays that way for the next 7 days. Then on the 14th, we know it goes up to 474, or sorry, drops to 474.50, and it stays that way for the next 15 days up until we get to the 29th, when it jumps up to 508.91 and stays that way for July 30th, 31st, 1st, and 2nd, so for the next 4 days. And then on August 2nd, we jump up to 578.63, and it stays that way for the next 5 days. I'm not sure why I wrote August 4th there. That was a mistake. The billing cycle starts on the 7th, so up until the 7th it's going to stay at 578.63, and then the new billing period continues. So we need to take into account that it stayed 774.50 for 7 days, 474.50 for 15 days. And the way that we do that is we take the amount times the number of days, and we write that number over here. So I'm going to take 774.50 and multiply it by 7. And what I get is $5,421.50. Then I'm going to take 15 times 474.50 and come up with $7,117.50. Then I'm going to take 4 times 508.91 and come up with $2,035.64. And 5 days at 578.63 would be $2,893.15 if those 5 days were all added up. And so now what we need to do is total these last two columns. So not surprisingly, the number of days totals to be 31, the number of days between billing cycles. And if I add up the 5,000 number, the 7,000 number, and the 2,000 numbers, I get $467.79. So if I'm going to find the average daily balance, then I need to take that big 17,000 number. So the average daily balance is going to be the 17,467.79, right? And remember what that is. That's the amount on the card every day, right? Added up. And then we're going to divide that by the number of days. And when we do, we get the average daily balance of $563.48. That's the answer for part A. $563.48, always rounding to the nearest cent. B was they're wanting to know the monthly finance charge. No problem. We're going to take our 1.5%, which is 0.015, times the average daily balance. And when we do that, when we take our finance charge times that, we get $8.45. So the finance charge is $8.45. And part C is, well, what's the amount going into the next billing cycle? And so it's going to be the 563.48. The 578.63, right? It's going to be what we had on the card, right? Plus any finance charges. There were no late fees or anything. We paid our card on time. We just didn't pay off the full balance. So 578.63 plus $8.45 is 587.08. That is what is going to be then applied as you go into the next billing cycle. And $8.45 may not seem like a lot of money, but if it keeps going that way and they're getting this from millions of people, it's a lot of money, right? That's how credit cards make the most of their money. That and the late charges and other things that can accumulate that we'll see in another problem. So this is probably the worst case scenario for the homework. There's a good detailed problem in the book, and I'm sure others in the My Math Lab stuff, but this should help you navigate through those problems. Then we have a couple of other problems that I thought would be helpful to look at. In this next one, what we have is at the beginning of a 31-day billing period, Sandy has an unpaid balance of $730 on her credit card. 3 days before the end of her billing cycle, she pays $400. Find her finance charge at 3.6% per month, right? That 3.6 times 12, that's a 43% annual percentage rate. That's crazy. But it happens to be the situation that she's in. So she has this. No problem. We can handle that. What we need to do is find out her average daily balance. So if we're reading this appropriately, she has a $730 initial balance, and she keeps that balance for 28 days. Because 3 days before the billing cycle, she makes a payment of $400, which brings her balance down to $300. So this is the $400 payment that they say happened. And so for the last 3 days of the billing cycle, it's $330. Well, we're going to do the same thing that we did above. We're going to take $730 times 28 and come up with $20,440. 3 times $330, come up with $990 for a grand total of $21,430, right? If you took what was on the card every day and added it up, that's what you'd have. So the average daily balance is going to be that $21,430 divided by 31, and that's $691.29. That we need to apply the interest to. And so the answer to their question is a result of that product, which is $24.89. That's the finance charge that's on there. So pretty hefty with that large interest rate. Coming back down to a more normal interest rate of 1.6 per month, right? So if I multiply that 12, a 19% interest rate seems right about for a credit card. What they're going to tell us about this one may seem daunting because they say a lot, but it's actually not a terrible problem. So as we look at this problem, Amy's bank card charges 1.6% per month on the average daily balance, as well as the following fees. She has a cash advance fee, a late payment fee, and over the credit limit fee. So this will help you out with the last problems that are in the homework from this section. This past month, Amy's average daily balance was $2,557. She was on vacation and did not get her account payment on time, which resulted in a late payment charge, and as a consequence, charges accumulated to a sum above her credit limit. She also used her card for 4 $100 cash advances while on vacation. Find the interest charged to the account based on the account transactions in that month. So if we look at the question, the one that says find the interest charges to the account, right? I don't think I can, maybe I can highlight that. a little bit better. Find the interest charges to the, I don't know, but you see where I'm at. Find the interest charges to the account. They're just asking about interest. If they're asking about interest, it is just the interest rate, right, which is 1.6%, written as 0.016 as a decimal, times the average daily balance. So that first question, it may seem like you have to do a lot, but if they're truly asking for interest, they are just having you multiply the interest rate times the average daily balance, which turns out to be a finance charge of $40.91, right? And so you can see that on your calculator. So the better question is, what are also the additional fees for the month? Well, if we look, she had, let's take it in order of how they said it. She was on vacation and did not get her account payment on time, which resulted in a late payment. So from the late payment, she was charged $25. And when that happened, it pushed her account over the credit limit. So you have the credit limit fee of $20 that happened to kick in just because she was so close to her credit limit, and then that late payment fee pushed her over that. She also used her cards for 4 $100 cash advances. Now, it says 5% and $10, whichever is greater, right? What's the greater of the two? Well, 5% of 100 is only $5, so they're going to charge her $10 for each of those 4 individual withdrawals. So she's getting charged $40. So notice that that's super close to even the interest earned. So they make a lot of money on cash advances and things like that. So $40, $60, 85 additional dollars in fees that she's accumulated that month. Both the 85 and the 4091 would be tacked onto her balance at the end of the month, and result in, you know, so you can see how somebody can bury themselves in credit card debt, especially if they're um, not making payments on time and taking cash advances. There's better ways to get to your money than through a credit card, except sometimes that's the only way, and we just accept the payments as needed. Um, so see if this is manageable for you. If not, let me know via email or or other means, right? Coming to Zoom, and I can get those questions addressed for you.